Ask a lot of writers and they'll tell you that the key to creating good narrative is conflict.
Listen, I can't do this.
I know, you don't have to. I know what I need to tell.
My characters need a desire to pursue, and they need obstacles in their path to overcome in order to get that desire. It's pretty commonly understood that this is just the basics of good storytelling. And in some ways, I think they're kind of right. Because a lot of times, that's what we want. We want drama. We want conflict. We want high stakes to make things interesting. But if you're constantly being bombarded by conflict in your real life or the other media you're consuming, it might be nice to spend some time with a story that takes a step back from high-stakes conflict as the primary narrative driving force.
How's life doing?
Yeah, no complaints. You?
Same old, same old.
By the standards of conventional narrative, nothing really happens in Paterson, a movie about a bus driver and poet. He drives a bus, he writes poems, he walks his dog, he hangs out with his partner, who does a bunch of crafts and art. Plenty of stuff is actually happening, but it's not the kind of stuff we usually watch a movie to see a character do. Ultimately, the movie's fully aware of this. Sometimes it's even teasing you with the idea that something is about to happen.
Nobody move!
And then it kind of never really does. You could call this an anti-drama. In traditional narrative structure for a film, we set up the world of the character's everyday life, and then there's an inciting incident, a moment where something happens that calls the character to the big adventure that will be most of the story. But in Paterson, it's like the inciting incident never arrives. Almost the entire movie kind of feels like the setup for another film. This might sound frustrating or boring to you if that's not what you want, but if you know what you're getting into and you're in the mood for it, the anti-drama approach can provide a unique break from the high-stakes drama and excitement that are built into like 98% of our stories. Paterson is a movie where nobody's going to be selling meth, dying, or crashing out, and it's one of my personal go-to comfort films. Ever since I first watched Apocalypse Now as a teenager, and it completely changed my perception of war, I've loved movies that take you straight into the heart of darkness. You know, the movies that grapple with some of the most difficult and challenging subject matter that we face as humans in life. I mean, one of my favorites, and I think one of the best and most relevant films of the last decade, is The Zone of Interest. And movies like this have the potential to offer us new perspectives. They can even be a wake-up call, challenging us to examine ourselves or the world around us. But there can also be an attitude that treats these kinds of movies, which deal with difficult themes, as inherently more artistically credible. It kind of discredits movies that are more lighthearted or silly, or which exist mostly to bring us joy. But these movies are some of the most beloved, the ones we watch countless times and which can hold a very special place in our lives. So let's talk about the feel-good or the comfort film. What is it? Well, it's kind of tricky to talk about because it's a pretty subjective category. It's going to be different things to different people. Whatever it is, let's explore what makes these films work, the attributes they share. And along the way, I'm going to talk about movies that bring me joy, with a special focus on ones that I think have just as much artistic intention and craft as anything that deals with more serious issues or subject matter. If you're looking for a more lighthearted movie to watch, I think you'll find at least one of these will be perfect for you. Maybe I shouldn't have to do this, but I kind of feel the need to defend the feel-good film. Reflexively, sometimes we can write this off as escapism, the accusation being that people just use entertainment to distract themselves from very real problems in their own lives or in the world. I'm not advocating for using movies as a sandbox that you can stick your head into. It's important to stay informed. But I think we have to be attentive to this balance. There's a point at which we can become trapped in chronic nervous system distress because of the media we're consuming. Our brains are hardwired to scan our environment for potential dangers or problems. The media you consume can then end up releasing cortisol, raising your blood pressure, elevating your heart rate, inducing stress. And when we have access to this media in our pockets all the time, it means that places in our lives that may have typically been felt as a safe haven in the past, like maybe our living room or our bedroom, are now often the places where we're really intensely and intimately consuming some of the most distressing media that we ever consume. It's not even that the negativity we're consuming is necessarily sensationalized, although it often is. You could just be consuming the straight facts about bad things that are happening in the world. But there's enough of those things that you could spend all day, every day doing just that. And doing that would trap you in such a place of physical nervous system exhaustion that it would destroy your ability to actually take any action towards improving or helping to fix any of those problems. If you find yourself in that place, you might need a break or a rest. And there's lots of ways you could do this. You could go for a walk, you could meditate, you could hang out with friends, but this is a movie channel. So I'm going to talk about one of my favorite ways of doing that, which is putting on a feel-good or comfort film. In the same way negative media can have an effect on our nervous system, feel-good movies can as well, almost acting as a kind of guided meditation, creating a space where we're in a familiar environment, looking at beautiful images that bring us joy, and giving us a contained period of time within which we can hopefully relax. So let's get into it. Maybe the most obvious in this category is the goofy comedy. Not only is the point to make you laugh, but it's to make you laugh not with heavy-hitting satire or social commentary, but just silliness and ridiculousness, at least on its face. For me, nobody does this better than the Coen brothers.
Willie doesn't care about anything. He's a nihilist.
Oh, that must be exhausting.
I like The Big Lebowski especially for a few reasons. First, because it's basically a parody of neo-noir film, so it scratches a certain cinephile itch for me. But it's also intricately written in this extremely self-referential way.
This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait.
This will not stand, you know? This aggression will not stand, man.
Which rewards multiple viewings, something that plays a big role in creating a comfort film. Part of what brings us comfort when we watch a film is familiarity. This means any movie that you've watched a bunch of times, for whatever reason, has a higher potential of becoming a comfort film, even if it's not traditionally a feel-good kind of movie. But this also means that movies that have high rewatchability are more likely to become comfortable films. There's something soothing to us about predictability, which is why sometimes very conventional story structure or TV shows that use the same format for every episode often end up acting as a type of comfort media. What I love is a movie that somehow strikes this magical balance, where the more you watch it, the more familiar you become, but where there's also enough layers that by the fifth watch, you're still discovering something new.
This is a very complicated case, Maude. You know, a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous.
And that's what The Big Lebowski is for me. Another thing that creates this comfortable familiarity is nostalgia. Sometimes we have nostalgia for the film itself, if it's one we've been watching since our childhood. There's so many great animated films I could name in this category. For classic Disney animation, I have a particular love for 101 Dalmatians. But obviously for many people, which movies have this familiar nostalgia is just kind of going to be luck of the draw. What did you happen to watch as a kid?
I wish I had $1 million.
Every year at Christmas growing up, my family watched It's a Wonderful Life. And I think it's a good movie, but watching it also has this extra layer of transporting me back to watching it as a kid at one of my favorite times of year. For me, the best comfort films from my childhood are the ones that still feel relevant to me now, where I'm not just reliving the experience of watching the movie as a kid, but actually seeing the story from a fresh perspective as an adult and getting something new out of it. But sometimes the nostalgia isn't from the memories you have attached to the movie in your childhood. Sometimes a newer film calls back elements of our childhood or an earlier time in our life that we're nostalgic for. Moonrise Kingdom is basically this for me, because while I didn't really manage to see it until I was almost an adult, There are so many elements of the film that invoke various childhood memories for me or adventures. To paraphrase how Wes Anderson describes the film, it's like an adult's memory of their own childhood fantasy. When I was a kid, I loved playing in the woods, and the idea of setting out on an adventure on my own was extremely compelling. And this movie captures exactly what I remember thinking that adventure would have been like as a kid. Moonrise Kingdom, though, for me, isn't just a comfort film because of the nostalgia. Many of Wes Anderson's films have a comforting feeling to me, and I think this is because many of them are presented explicitly as stories. It's like they're not trying to trick you into thinking that any of what you're watching is real. People complain about this creating an emotional distance, but sometimes that's good. Sometimes a comfortable remove where you're feeling like you're turning the pages of a pop-up book is actually what we want. They remind you you're inside someone's story or a fantasy itself, and that also reminds us of the kinds of imaginative play that children often engage in, but which we're pretty quick to lose room for as adults. The other thing about Wes Anderson's films that I find comfortable is their commitment to beauty. There's something about these controlled compositions, the well-orchestrated color palettes, and just the beautiful symmetrical images in general that create a space that feels soothing and relaxing to my brain. So if we're going to talk about beauty as an element of comfort, of course I need to mention Studio Ghibli. All of Hayao Miyazaki's films bring me joy, but in the interest of having this video not just be a list of his movies, I'm limiting myself to one movie per director. I honestly don't really see how anyone couldn't be delighted by some of the most beautifully crafted works of animation ever created. Miyazaki's worlds are some of the most beautiful and inventive in all of cinema, not just animated film. And like Moonrise Kingdom, they kind of tap into this sense of childhood play and whimsy. But as beautiful as they are, the real heart of a Miyazaki film for me is not necessarily the beauty, but the storytelling. It's always imaginative, it's usually hopeful and fairly gentle, even when it's dealing with sometimes kind of difficult, scary subject matter. Kiki's Delivery Service holds a special place in my heart because I think it resonates with anyone who has kind of set out on their own to go do some kind of work or creative endeavor in the world. That can be a challenging and rewarding process, especially for a young person. If you've ever set out into that unfamiliar territory to do something on your own, Kiki's Delivery Service is a story that really beautifully will encourage you on that journey. And while we're on the subject of beautiful movies, I want to mention Babette's Feast. This is a movie about a woman who ends up with some money and decides to use that money to cook a lavish meal for a bunch of ultra-religious people who don't ever indulge in the sensual pleasures of life. It's equal parts cheeky, funny, and just beautiful. Sometimes a movie pulls out all the stops to create the most extraordinarily beautiful images possible, but there are others that take a slightly different approach, working more to remind us to pay attention to and look out for the day-to-day beauty that exists in the world. Our lives can be filled with all kinds of difficult, awful, and even ugly things, but there is almost always, I sincerely hope for you, at least something beautiful in your environment right now. And we can make our lives better and more enjoyable for absolutely $0 by learning how to attune our attention to the beautiful things that already exist in our environment. If you want a movie that's almost a guide in how to do this, there's no better option than Perfect Days, directed by Wim Wenders. This is a quiet little film about a toilet cleaner in Tokyo that I've talked about before, and mostly we just watch him live out his day-to-day life. There's not a lot going on, but that's basically the point. Like the main character, the movie looks out for the tiny details in life that are beautiful but easy to miss. The ones which, if you pay attention to them, you'll be rewarded internally for noticing. The eye for hidden beauty, though, isn't the only thing that makes Perfect Days a great comfort film. It's also a movie that breaks conventional narrative structure, kind of in the same way that Patterson does. Another way to engage with conflict in your film is to set the stakes very low. One of my favorite examples of this is the delightful Yasujiro Ozu movie, Good Morning. This is a movie I watched back-to-back 2 nights in a row because I loved it so much the first time. The basic premise of the story is that these parents refuse to get these 2 boys a television, and so they go on a strike of silence. When I think of Ozu, I think of these black and white, very sincere but kind of austere examinations of family dynamics. But Good Morning is Ozu at his most playful, and it's delightful. It's a lot of fun, and Ozu's color palettes and compositions are an under-acknowledged predecessor to what Wes Anderson is doing. So if that kind of intricately crafted beauty is comforting to you, Good Morning is definitely one you'll want to watch. Another way to challenge conventional narrative is to avoid conventional plot and dialogue altogether. Then just take the silliness dial and turn it way up. This is actually a long-standing tradition in film history. There's the delightful, charming antics of Charlie Chaplin or the daring stunts of Buster Keaton. These films relied not so much on story and plot, but on set design, blocking, and choreography for their comedic energy. One of my favorite characters in this tradition is Monsieur Hulot, created by the French director Jacques Tati. If you're just looking for technical artistry, scale, and complexity of set pieces, the obvious standout choice from Tati is his masterpiece Playtime, which has some incredible, hilarious, well-designed set pieces that are unlike anything else you'll see in any other film. But the movie I really want to highlight here is My Uncle. If only for the fact that it just has more random cute dogs than any other movie I've ever seen. If you know of a movie with more cute dogs in it than My Uncle, put it in the comments below. In this movie, Hulot lives in a charming old French town, and he goes to visit his sister who lives in this very modernist home. And Hulot, of course, is completely bamboozled by modern technology. His brother-in-law insists that he's a deadbeat and that he has to get a job and that he's a bad influence on their son. And a bunch of charming antics ensue. It's basically pure chaotic silliness, but with a weirdly intense focus on good design. There's nothing super important or dramatic happening here, but I think Jacques Tati understands the comedic value of just putting a bunch of dogs in a scene or having somebody sit in a funny chair. If you want to know what actually funny, lighthearted postmodernism looks like, I think this movie is a great example of that. And if this bit from Wes Anderson's The French Dispatch is funny and satisfying to you, then you're gonna love this movie. Those are just a few of the movies that bring me joy. There are so many others, and I'm sure you have a bunch of your own, so I would love to hear from you. Please mention your favorites in the comments below. I should admit, the stuff that stares directly into the void and the stuff I find kind of comforting sometimes overlaps. Twin Peaks is one of those kinds of things. If you've never seen Twin Peaks, I really recommend checking it out, and you can watch it right now on Mubi, my sponsor for this video. Mubi is an online hand-curated streaming cinema with movies from all around the world, and you're gonna find all kinds of great stuff on there. Some of it will be incredibly beautiful. Some of it might be in this indie anti-drama space we talked about. You might also find the exact opposite of the comfort film. They just released a new series called Mussolini, directed by Joe Wright. So if you're tired of the feel-good stuff and want to go into the heart of darkness, you should check that out. But I also want to mention the Mubi Notebook. This comes out from Mubi twice a year, and it's a beautiful print magazine. A subscription to it for a year is $40, which I think is a great price considering like how beautiful these are essentially as pieces of art. This is the 7th edition. I have them all. They're all beautifully designed. So go check that out. You can go to mubi.com/ThomasFlight to check out Twin Peaks, Mussolini, browse the curated catalog, or sign up for the Mubi Notebook subscription. Again, go to mubi.com/ThomasFlight. And if you go to that link, you'll get 30 days for free. Thanks again to Mubi for sponsoring this video.